Hello and welcome to Labour Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. On this week's edition of the program, we'll continue the conversation that happened during the plenary at the 111th session of the International Labour Organization Conference, with special focus on the no work, no pay policy at the federal government.
We now took him to National Hospital because he has started vomiting blood. He's vomiting blood. When we took him there...
The pathetic story of 49-year-old wife of one of the drivers here at Chanzi Construction Company, Austin Okumbo, was said to have died on the 13th of April due to alleged unfair labor treatment by the company. The mother of two narrates how her husband was unfairly treated and practically left to die. Our story and those of other workers engaged as casual workers by the company are the reasons for this picketing exercise. Before now, security agents had a hectic time controlling the workers who were angered by the appearance of one of the Chinese. The workers pulled down the gate as no management official was in sight to open it. The labor leaders want the Nigerian government to ensure that local and foreign companies prioritize the rights and welfare of workers.
Treat us with Nigerian labor law. Nigerian labor law says there is freedom to unionize. Nigerian labor law says you can bargain with your employer.
Come to give yourself liberty so that you will get better pay package. When you go, your people will celebrate you.
The Congress, in conjunction with the Construction Workers Union, has promised to assist the widow in all ways possible, pending the outcome of its interface with the construction company.
I expect the Nigerian government to shut down this site. The government should shut down this site until the standard of operations, the conditions of work of the workers that are helping put together this is established.
Injury to one is injury to all, so says the common labor parlance. The Nigerian Labour Congress, which has mobilized workers to this site, says these workers will not leave these premises until the management of the Chinese company comes to the table and treats its workers like human beings.
The Nigerian Labour Congress has secured the release of 3 workers detained by Chanzi Construction Company. It also got a commitment from the company that the widow of one of the drivers, Ruth Austin, will be adequately compensated. These were part of the resolution reached between NLC and the Chinese company following the intervention of the Foreign Affairs Ministry. The Congress, however, announced the ceasefire following the resolutions reached. After 2 weeks of intense deliberation and strategic consultations, the 111th Conference of the International Labour Organization, ILO, ended in Geneva, Switzerland. Several adoption and resolutions were made at the conclusion of the conference. One of this is a new labour standard aimed at supporting opportunities for people of all ages, reskill and upskill continuously in the rapidly changing labour market.
We heard resounding and unequivocal support for a global coalition for social justice. We must now build on this momentum.
At the end of the conference, newly elected chairperson of the governing board of ILO, Richard Adeyemi, presided over the meeting of the body.
Delighted and honored to assume the leadership on behalf of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as the next chairperson of the ILO governing body for the 2023-2024 session. We appreciate the thoughtfulness in nominating and confirming Nigeria.
Speaking of the expectations from ILO members, Adeyemi thanked them for the confidence reposed in Nigeria. He promised that the trust to be respected with all sense of responsibility.
Our agenda in future meetings should take on broad challenges such as these to confront and shape global discourse as a matter of urgency. Our policy outcomes and decisions should inspire hope for for a better quality of life and new opportunities. We are ready to deliver on the mandate entrusted to us, prepared to serve.
The Deputy Director General of ILO says the development will foster growth across the globe.
There was absolute great endorsement of the Global Coalition for Social Justice, which is an important initiative of the Director General, Mr. Gilbert Ongbo. And the essence of the Global Commission on Social Justice is to make sure that issues related to social development, social justice, are at the same level or receive the same level of attention as economic issues and environmental issues.
The governing board is the highest decision-making organ of the International Labour Watch body. Abiodun Richard Adejola is also the Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland. Nigeria will lead the ILO governing body from June 2023 to June 2024.
There's a need for African countries to, rejig our legislation in such a way that it will protect the most vulnerable. The whole concept of social protection is to have a safety net that can protect the vulnerable ones, the aged, the unemployed, and even the working people in the society. So that is what we need to do in the interim. But in moving forward, beyond legislation, oftentimes you'll agree with me that in Africa, we have legislation, even though not too strong. But again, implementation of those legislations are critical issues for both employers and employed, the social partners, that we need to rethink how we can enforce it, because one thing is to have good legislation and another thing is for us to have them implemented. So we are clear about where we want to move Africa in terms of social protection and entrepreneurship, and we are desirous to ensure that these vulnerable workers and citizens, do not fall below the safety net, below the social protection gap.
African countries can afford to provide social protection, but it's stealing. And if you look at it, first is that stealing when there are programs, rather than financing the programs, politicians and their cronies take the money from financing the social protection programs and they crash. And then there are the others stealing from the private sectors who don't pay taxes. The private sector don't pay taxes. Some avoid tax, they dodge tax, they evade taxes. If they pay fair taxes, the monies can be made available for government to be able to finances. The other crisis now that we see with COVID is the crisis of debt. The debt burden is affecting social protection spending across Africa because we are busy financing the debts. We are not able to put our money to finance social protection. So what we are demanding as organized labor, particularly the African Trade Union Organization, ITUC Africa, we are campaigning for a number of management of debt rescheduling, interest rate review, and then in some cases, clear debt forgiveness.
On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with the General Secretary of the Non-Academic Staff Union of Universities, Comrade Peters Adeyemi. He brought us up to speed on several information that happened during the International Labour Organization conference, while also speaking about the challenge that Nigerian workers have whenever they decide to embark on an industrial action, especially with a new judgment by the National Industrial Court that states that if any worker goes on strike, the no work, no pay policy must be implied. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
It's another conference of the International Labour Organization, the 111th in session. You served at the standard of application. Can you bring us up to speed on what the conversation has been, what has been the complaints, and what has been the intervention thus far?
I think one of the first cases that was dealt with about the second or the third day of the sitting of the committee is the one that affects Nigeria on child labor. A few other countries have also had their cases listed and presented. And as far as the child labor issue is concerned, we were able to the government of our country was able to do a presentation which I think cover really some of the whole gamut of the issues that were brought against them. And that has to do with numerous children out of school. You remember that our immediate past Minister of Labour, Adeyemi, also lamented, in fact, he said that one of his failures in office was that he was not able to stem the tide of the number of children that are out of school. And that came up very prominently in this case. And you also have the case of the crisis of insecurity in the Northeast, particularly in Borno State. I think emphasis was also laid on the recruitment of small girls, small boys into the, some of these crazy guys who are called Boko Haram and whatever. And of course, the senseless killings, and like you can still remember the Chibok girls that were all taken out of their school at night. There are a lot of other terrible things. But I think the government tried in explaining its position, and the Nigerian Labour Congress also came up and spoke about the need for government to intensify efforts towards ensuring that this problem is nipped in the bud. That for me is a significant one because it affects my country. And I think that the way the government presented the various laws, how they are also trying to intensify efforts in ensuring that this is curbed. And particularly also the fact that in some part of the country, particularly in the north, there is always this difficulty of getting even parents to encourage their children to go to school. But for me, I think it was a very, very fantastic outing for our government. So far, the processes and the proceedings for the work of the Committee on Standard is ongoing. Our report will be ready by Wednesday, and then it will be presented on Thursday for appropriate action and adoption.
All right, I'll move to the next question, which is the judgment by the industrial courts some few weeks ago, which insists that government position on no work, no pay stands. How has the labor community been reacting to this? Do you think is the right step in the right direction?
In fact, my reaction is that of surprise. And that in itself contradicts another National Industrial Court judgment, which our union obtained some time ago, because the federal government, we went on strike then, the federal government said, if in our agreement with the government, the National Industrial Court said in its judgment that since the clause of no victimization is contained in the agreement we signed with the federal government, the no work, no pay cannot apply to us. But you also know that this is not a case that directly affected NASU. This is a case that was instituted by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU. So I think ASU will be in a position to go and appeal that judgment, because that judgment in itself is clearly a judgment that does not take into consideration the fact that unions in that sector did not just embark on strike. We were compelled, we were forced to go on the strike that we embarked on as a result of the government failure to implement the various agreements that they have entered with the unions. So it's not as if we just woke up one day and then we started going on strike. So the question is, and this is the puzzle, this is the what the National Industrial Court will have to unravel. Is it that government can sign agreements severally with unions, and when they fail to implement those content of those agreements, we will just fold our hands? Because there's one National Industrial Court somewhere that will say no work, no pay. So it's clearly unacceptable. But the good thing is that we can appeal the judgment of the National Industrial Court now. We can take the case to the Court of Appeal, and I'm sure ASU is going to do that, and we have not gotten to the end of the matter.
Okay, very quickly, currently in the country, we are faced with the issue of inflation due to the fact that the president of the country announced that there will be no fuel subsidy going forward. How has your members been reacting to this, owing to the fact that even the new national minimum wage, which is not new anymore, is due for negotiation, despite also again that the president has announced that there will be an increase in minimum wage. As an experienced labor leader, how would you react to this inflation and the current situation that we find ourselves in?
I don't think that we can talk about the minimum wage in abstract. We have to talk about the minimum wage taking on board the recent pronouncement of the president of our country, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and the fact that he has finally confirmed that subsidy is off. And the reality on ground now is that the price of a liter of PMS has gone about 300% more than it used to be. And you know the problem with this is that PMS is not like Coca-Cola or a bottle of beer, that if you like, you can drink. If you don't like, you can stay away. Fuel in itself powers a lot of human activities in Nigeria. In fact, without it, you hardly can even live. Here in Geneva, you can live without a generator. In Nigeria, you are not likely to have a complete house or a comfort or whatever without a generator. So there is going to be multi-facet or multivarious effects and impacts as far as the issue of the minimum wage is concerned. I don't have an idea now of the figure that the labor is presenting for minimum wage or whatever they are asking the government. But I think that it's important for labor to do a proper groundwork and homework before they proceed with the so-called negotiation, which they said they are starting on the 19th, that has to cover a whole lot of issues. Look, we have to say very clearly that this issue of inflation, even before the exit of President Muhammadu Buhari, we have seen inflation going up to 21.3, 22 point something. Figures that have been rolled out by the National Bureau for Statistics. So it wasn't even as if the level of inflation has not been on the high side in our country. So, and side by side with that, you also have to look at the value of our currency, because you now find that the value of our currency has been terribly and badly devaluated. But government has refused to come out to accept that they have devalued the currency and running into a level where our currency is virtually useless. Unfortunately, that is the situation. So when you have a situation where inflation is moving and the value of the currency has you cannot say has that type of impact when it comes to making purchases, then it's really, really very problematic. So our members are now faced with multivarious challenges of one, what they are paid no longer has the value of what it's supposed to have. Two, the cost of goods and services have gone haywire. And now added to that problem is the fact that they cannot easily even access fuel. So if a worker has a car and he used to use like maybe 5,000 to fill that tank before, I think with what we have now, it will require like 20-something to 30,000 to fill the car. And that's a big problem because it means that virtually all what you earn as salary goes on just one item. So inflation is one of the biggest problems that we are contending with right now. Don't forget also that the 30,000 naira minimum wage that the government agreed to with the labor, most of the states are not paying.
Particularly, I know that privatization is one issue that has been a cause of concern for PSI. How has engagement been going on the national and international level?
Yeah, it's becoming a problem even in Africa and the Arab countries, where I serve as the president of PSI. Day in, day out, governments are deliberately moving out of governance. They are surrendering governance to private elements in the private sector and using government fund to fund those private individuals and private enterprise. So it's really, really something that is one of the biggest fraud that's currently going on with our political leaders in different parts of the African country. And don't also forget that one of the dictates of the Bretton Woods institutions, that's when you talk of the World Bank, the IMF, is that government should have no business in business. And that's why it has become a big problem. Workers who have been gainfully employed, when these institutions and establishments are privatized, they move them out of normal employment and probably start the problem of casualization. So PSI has engaged various governments within Africa and the Arab countries, particularly on the issue of privatization. They have also cleverly moved into what they call PPP, that is public-private partnership, which in itself is another dubious way. You know, you cannot say that government will have no business in business. If you look at what is happening even in our country, Nigeria today, is that privatization is going into vital area where government is expected to be visible. In the health sector, they are privatizing. In education, they are privatizing. So if you in fact, we have had a big fight in PSI with Lagos State government over the policy or their plans to even privatize water in Lagos. We've had a serious fight because they took some money from the World Bank, and one of the conditions is that they must privatize the water board and water something in Lagos. And we've had a very serious fight. Right now, we are fighting the issue of privatization of education up to the level of tertiary institution. When you ask yourself, even the health sector, so you ask yourself, if health, government will privatize health, government will privatize education, government will privatize water, then you ask yourself, what then is the government existing for? The type of waivers that our government gives to these people in itself is enough money to run the economy. When government says they don't have money, you begin to ask yourself, because you consciously and deliberately refuse to plug loopholes. You refuse to do why are the rich not supposed to be taxed excessively. The only set of people, workers that you find, the only set of people that pay tax regularly in our country today are the workers, because government can take that money from source. And in some cases, you see that what the basic amenities for which these taxes are deducted are never provided. So it's an act of lawlessness which cannot be allowed to continue. The rich will continue to enjoy different type of incentives at the expense of the poor. And I think these are issues Labour will have to also address.
Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that Labour creates wealth.